Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out. And I can't stress enough, Christmas is next week. And with all the other holidays, you want to share, feel free to email me. You want to have season's greetings, well wishes, email me. And I will read them on the show. All right, and that's it. Also, if you have show ideas, feel free to reach out. All right, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on are Speaker, of course. Thank you so much, Speaker, for everything. iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, and pretty much everything. So it won't be hard to find me. And also on YouTube, I'm on there too. Feel free to fill up the comments, share, like, and also subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. All right, so it's Friday, so I'm focusing in on all of you. So I'm going backwards now. Now I'm going to talk about the Chinese language and the origin. You know, it's the foundation of all. Prolifically, it's just quite interesting how they all, how Chinese, for the most part, intermingles with most of the well-known dialects in the Asian continent. So with that said, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to briefly state this, and then I'm going to talk about go in more depth about what I mean. So, influence is really something that can be interesting, or the way that it is handled and the way that it is used throughout time. So with that said, I'm going to get into facts about the origins of the Chinese language. So first, I'm going to start out with the AI generated response as far as this is concerned here. All right, so it says, let it pop up, refresh yourself and pop up here. It says, the origin of Chinese language traces back to the Proto-Sinto-Tiberian language family. This is a prehistoric ancestor that links Chinese with other languages across Asia. Now, the earliest known form of Chinese, referred to as Old Chinese or Aramaic Chinese, emerged during the Shang dynasty, which reigned from 1600 to 1600 to 1046 BCE, and is documented in an oracle bone inscription dating back to around 1250 BCE. So these inscriptions, carved on turtle shells and animal bones, represent the oldest attested written Chinese and are considered the earliest direct evidence of sentient languages. So the writing system evolved from pictographs and ideograms, which conveyed tangible objects and abstract concepts, forming a sophisticated and enduring script. So over time, Old Chinese developed into Middle Chinese, spoken between the 6th and 12th century, which is AD, which serves as the basis for modern dialects. So the language family is a part of the broader Sinto-Tiberian group, with the Sintic branch being the most prominent, despite the lack of definite evidence for the exact moment of diversion from Proto-Sinto-Tiberian. The country of the written system is deep-rooted in ancient Chinese underscores, and the language is remarkable, and it exudes the country's history. So going back to what I said earlier. Now, it's remarkable and it's a given with what the Chinese culture has given to the development of our modern society, where that is spread outward in so many ways. When you get in the aspects of paper, you get in the aspects of commerce. So you name it. Most of it is really rooted in the aspects of the innovation of Chinese Chinese technologies, or primitive technologies, and linking it to so forth. But on the flip side of that, the ugly truth here, which is something that is, of course, the notable topic of here. What happens when the aspects of ideologies that are bad, for people that don't really don't nourish the aspects of people to develop, either pragmatic or centrist or just well-rounded ideas that really gets in the heart of the matter of how that shapes the undertones for a society. In this case, in the wrong ways. When you get in the aspects of the communist rule, you get in the aspects of dictators like Mao and so forth. These things, these people, these ideas will really detrimental in the aspects of flourishment, and that is fundamentally important to understand when it comes to enlightenment and progression. Now, it's quite interesting. This is going back in my mind to the aspects of, which I understood this, but you really see this if you appreciate the ability of what travel can do for yourself, as far as broadening your perspective. So, back when I was in college, I had a schoolmate that said, it's interesting when you travel and you come back, you realize that things that you deem to be problems aren't really that. And he was referring to the aspects of, for this instance, he at that time went to China, and he was talking about how the division between the rich and the poor and all these things are really pronounced to where it's something that, can't be ignored, even though mainstream media there and over here like to sugarcoat it for what should be addressed or should be said. And so language, getting back to the root of the matter, what the subject matter here is of this show, language in itself is a complementary to addressing and to, sorting out in the aspects of what do these things mean. So I can't stress enough the aspects of how the languages like Chinese languages and mostly all of Asian dialects, they express the understanding that tonality means something. So the way that you address someone in your tone, or let me go back to that. The way that you express a certain tone with a certain word means quite different. So how do these things, express themselves when we get into the territories of cultural values towards things, of something, political values towards things, and then even in the aspects of spiritual means and beings? What is that? Or how does that commingle itself in the language to outwardly showcase these things? And that is so really intricately, delicately woven into language here. All right, so I am going to delve even deeper and see what the Renaissance translations has to say about the history of the Chinese language. So with 1.3 billion speakers, the Chinese language is the most spoken language globally. It is also one of the oldest languages with the written Chinese dating back to 1,600 years. I'm sorry about that. 6,000 years. So several regional dialects of spoken Chinese have also emerged, but people prominently speak Mandarin in China. So Mandarin Chinese is also one of the 6 official languages of the UN. And then also the Pinyin. So Pinyin, and it's, when I was in college, I've said this briefly before, but I wanted to learn Japanese, but it's one of those things where you, in retrospect, you look back on it. Okay, well, maybe you take the time, but it's one of those things where it's better to learn a little bit and immerse yourself, because there's only so much you can learn in that school setting. But anyhow, with that long-winded talk here, originally Japanese was the focal point for me to learn the language in my studies, and I said, well, I would have had to been in school two extra years just for that. So I said, okay, let's start with Chinese. And I wound up finishing up with Spanish because I already knew that, and it just was one of those things. But what I took from it here, with the things that I did learn from the Chinese language, is quite interesting. With the sentence structure, it's quite simple and it's quite direct of how grammatical structure is expressed. But when you get into the characters here, that's when you have delicate, intricate meaning in between everything. And so I find it fascinating, when there is languages that make sure there is a understanding between the two. Some are more prolific than others. It's interesting. Whereas with English, for instance, which is my native tongue here, my native language, with English, there's a lot of different variations. There's a lot of different structure forms to express something or to express a main consensus of an idea. But Pinyin, it just overtly says this is this and that's that. So that in itself is rooted in the aspects of a viewpoint about the world too, of how that is set up, because it's one of those things, like I've said before, most of the time something is not created in a vacuum. It comes from somewhere. So language is not created in a vacuum. It comes from somewhere. It comes from ideas about something. And so these ideas are overtly, evidently stressed in the Chinese language. And so it backs a lot of understanding with how the Chinese culture and Chinese people, commingle and think too, for the most part. But I just find that interesting to add on to the layer of what is being written and what I'm saying today. All right, so with this particular article was being written. So, and the Chinese language has official status in China, Taiwan, and Singapore. Native Chinese speakers continue spreading the Chinese language worldwide through travel, international education, technology, and migration. Today, there are large numbers of Chinese speakers in the Southeast Asia and the U.S. region. Because of the popularity of Mandarin and Chinese globally, it is also becoming a common second learned language. In fact, more than 100 million students are learning the Chinese language worldwide. With around 6,000 years of history, it is easy to see people's fascination with the Chinese language. So from the first evidence of the pictorial Chinese written language to the prominence of the Chinese Mandarin as a global language, it has a rich history. So the Chinese written language in particular has deep ties with the Chinese culture. Its intricate symbols are timeless and are still seen with written Mandarin and Chinese today. So according to predictions, Chinese Mandarin will remain its prominent position in the future. But there's nuance to that. Nothing is, I don't know, I have the mentality, nothing is promised. So it will continue to be most spoken in native tongue, with a prediction to increase about 27% in the number of speakers by 2050. So the need to translate Mandarin Chinese is undoubtedly growing too. But for now, let's take a look at the origin of the Chinese language, as they say. So Chinese language scholars classify all variation of spoken Chinese as a part of the Sino-Siberian family. So these scholars believe that the origin of Chinese goes back to an original language called the Proto-Sino-Siberian, but there is a lack of evidence to prove otherwise. It is unclear where the Chinese language splits from its language group to become its own language. Nevertheless, it is known that the old Chinese language dates back to about 1700 BC, with characters from the Chinese written language inscribed to tortoise shells and bones. So this language is used throughout the Shang and the Zhou dynasty. It then evolved into the Middle Chinese, ancient Chinese, the language used during the Sui dynasty and Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty. So China covers a vast language area, so many Chinese dialects emerge. So the two main dialects today are Mandarin Chinese and Cantonese Chinese. From what I understand, Cantonese is supposed to be more rural, but let's go into this. So people in Guangdong province in China particularly speak Cantonese. Standardized Cantonese is also one of the official languages of Hong Kong and the forgive me for the pronunciation of this, Macau, elsewhere in China, so Mandarin is used. It is also the official language of most of the mainland China, Taiwan, and Singapore. So modern Chinese language. Modern Chinese language is the official version of the Chinese language used today. It was first developed in the 1900s to serve as the lingua franca for China. So, common language here. That's what that means from what I understand. And it's quite interesting. This is becoming prolific in the 1900s because the 1900s was a turning point for the Industrial Revolution too. So, here we go. Okay. So, the use of the language in different provinces in Chinese history had resulted in many manual and intelligible dialects and that you couldn't understand the dialects, so a standardized version was needed to be unified in the country. Beijing Mandarin Chinese formed its basis. Thus, modern Chinese is colloquially referred to as Mandarin in China. It is It uses 22 consonants and 9 vowel sounds. Sorry, I'll be right back. All right, many of which combine to form clusters. So overall, there are around 1,300 different symbols in this version of the language. So the Chinese language was also selected as one of the official languages of the UN. Unfortunately, comprehension of the language was poor. Only 11% of people in non-Mandarin areas understood the modern Chinese language. So to aid with literacy, a new form of Chinese was written in a language that is simplified with simplified characters and was established in 1949 as Simplified Chinese. And the efforts worked. So by 2020, over 80% of the Chinese population could speak modern standard Chinese. Written language. The Chinese written language emerged approximately 6,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest written languages worldwide. And so when it's so old, there's so much history, and again, that innate the ease for people to pay attention to it, because as something was staying, as I said before, if something was staying for so long, there must be something to it. It must be there to examine. All right, so the Chinese language does not use an alphabet. Each character represents a word or a phrase or something like that. So these characters are known as the Hangzi. They are used by nearly a 1/4 of the population and are an integral part of the Chinese culture. The first Chinese characters were based on pictograms and ideographs. Original character elements were combined with phonetic fixtures to compose many new characters in the Chinese language. So today there are about 56,000 characters, of which around 3,000 are used in everyday use. With so many characters, it can be challenging to translate Mandarin Chinese to learn it as a second language. And it's quite interesting because the professor who I was taking Chinese under, he said, if you want to learn Chinese, you must like torture because of how difficult it is. So as Chinese characters are single and roughly squared in shape, traditional Chinese text was written vertically. This is still seen in some regions such as Taiwan. However, it is now more common to see left to right formatting in areas that use simplified Chinese, a simplified version of the script that is used characters with fewer strokes. Nevertheless, you can still see some Mandarin in China written vertically in some places, such as on signs or the spines of books. All right, so I'm going to end on this. It says Chinese language distribution. The Chinese language is the most spoken native language globally, with more than 1.3 billion speakers. This is due to China's significant population, of which 92% speak in the language. It is also a primary language in Taiwan, which is 87.5% as of today, Hong Kong, 94.80%, Macau, 92%, and Singapore, which is 50.8%. Additionally, there is over 8 million Chinese speakers in Thailand and 3 million in the U.S. and 2.5 million in Malaysia. The spread of the Chinese language across the globe is primarily due to immigration. Many Chinese people fled the country in the 19th century to escape extreme poverty to move to neighboring Southeast Asia country. And so this is the turning point for people to understand about immigration most of the time. And then, when we get in the beginning of the 20th century, in the beginning in the 19th century of America too. That's why that's the whole bedrock of the U.S. to escape persecution, to escape trials and tribulations, to find something promising. And that's what's missing a lot in the understanding about immigration as of today, it's one thing, and that's what is the flourishment of culture too. When people who escape, or people who come to a country to better that country, that in itself opens the branch to expand a lot of times better ideas, new ideas, to be more productive. And that's what should be reiterated in the atmosphere here, and in the modern consensus about immigration. And that's why there's so many issues globally, not just in the U.S., globally, about immigration, because most of the time the immigrants who are coming, they're bad faith characters most of the time, and that's really unfortunate. And it's one of the things we got to talk about it for what it is, because if we don't, we're not really getting at a point to where we can have a better, a more productive, a more cohesive society here. All right, so many also immigrated to the U.S. for the same reason. They wanted more financial stability and the betterment of the next generation. See, the next generation. Think about what you're doing now to better our children, and so forth. And, even if you don't have children, the metaphorical idea of children are the future. Come on, So the most common version of the language is Mandarin Chinese. Around 955 million people speak Mandarin in China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. So Cantonese is the other primary spoken dialect with 70 million speakers. There are also around 70 million speakers in the Wu Chinese, in the Ming Chinese, and the Gang, Jing, Hakka, and the Chang. There are lesser known regional variants. So all dialects use the same Chinese written language. All right, so I'm going to end on this, and I would greatly like to know what you all think. Feel free to please reach out and give me your thoughts. And also, I appreciate y'all out there on YouTube who give comments, continue it out. And I appreciate the new subscriber. Thank you so much. And just share the wealth. Just, like, share, subscribe, comment. It'd be greatly appreciated. All right, so this reaches the end. Tune in, turn up. Have a very Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year. Take care.